We seem to be a long way away from you. Can you get a bit closer? Anyway, so let me just introduce our panelists, and we're going to have about 20 minutes or so when the panelists will be talking. But anybody wants to ask a question, or make a point, speeches are also welcome, keep it short. Please just stick your hand up and someone with the microphone will help. But let me introduce the panelists. As you look at the stage on your left, His Excellency Khamis Juma Abu Amin is Chairman of Dry Docks World and Maritime World of the UAE, based here in Dubai. In the centre, Jean-Luc Rillet, Senior Vice President for Commercial Operations for the whole of Africa for Emirates Airline. A great story he's got to tell about Africa. And then we have two representatives of the transport industry, commercial transport industry and services. Correction, actually, Sanjeev Radia is founder and chief executive officer of Astral Aviation, which is another airline company specialising in cargo, based in Nairobi, but does something very special in Africa with a connection to the Middle East. And then Hussein Hashim, chief executive officer of Aramex, who is Aramex, which is of course the cargo operation and freight forwarding, everything, does everything. And Charles Okelam, is Charles here? No, so we're missing Charles. Okay, all right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit down and shut up, and I'm going to invite each of our panelists, just by way of introduction, so you know who they are, to, in a couple of minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, maybe a bit more, longer, Your Excellency, just to say a little bit about yourself and the organisations you represent and why this conference is important. So first of all, Your Excellency, Khamis Abu Amin, Chairman of Dry Docks World and Maritime World, just can you tell people here, not everybody knows, a little bit about the company that you lead and its activities, what it's done and where it's going.
Good. Good afternoon, everybody. Start with, I joined Dry Dock World and Maritime World as a chairman in early 2010. As everybody knows, we had problems with certain economical situation with regard to the financial restructuring and so on. The downturn did not help the company as everybody would expect. However, we transformed the company. We are part of a global conglomerate called Dubai World, and we have a number of major businesses around the globe, including in Singapore and, of course, in Indonesia. And we've been working diligently to, what I call it, path the way for the industry to be a different industry from what it used to be. We transport.
Well, let's, Your Excellency, just a word about the dry dock,
yeah.
Because there's two businesses. The dry dock, it's been in operation for more than a quarter of a century.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about that, first of all, and then we can look at the other side of the business, okay, which is the maritime services.
The main thing is we produce a lot of, beside the repair and maintenance, which we do, we actually build new ships. Our targets recently has been into the conversion for oil and gas. That's our new strategy. And we build platforms and a number of important assets for the resource, which Africa has a lot of it, is oil and gas. We are very heavily involved with our counterpart in Africa in building different type of specialized vessels, especially in the service side, and also in the conversion for like FPSOs and so on for deep water production.
How big a vessel can the dry dock here take in Dubai? What's the scale of the vessel?
There is the conversion side usually takes between 9 to 13 or 16 months, dependent on
the size of the vessel, rather. The size of the vessel.
Size. We can take the biggest vessels in the world.
Okay, well that's dry dock. How many people work in Dry Dock World now?
In Dubai, we have over 13,000 people.
13,000 people. So there's a service there which is transport related. You can't have a major shipping network,
yep,
particularly with the energy network, unless you've got a repair yard. And the repair yard, the Dubai Dry Dock is providing a service, generating revenue, employing 13,000 people directly in this single operation. Now, the other part of the business is the maritime world.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that and what your aspirations for that business are.
Maritime world is a kind of a cluster. It's business clusters and maritime clusters. It's a service-oriented cluster. We have a maritime city in Dubai, and we cater for the service sector of the business. And usually that which include warehousing, include manufacturing, factory space, and include also all different industries which has green energy biased and also futuristic plans and in the engineering and the technology side. And we have one here, and the other one is in discussion at this moment in Indonesia.
Okay, so you're talking about setting up a subsidiary?
To some extent, yes.
Or a partnership, is it? Going to be a partnership, a new company with new partners?
Partnership in Indonesia, yes.
In Indonesia, is that going to be in Jakarta or somewhere else?
It's close to Batam Islands, part of the eastern side of it.
Okay, so the company is, fundamentally was inspired by the need to service great tankers coming from the Gulf, which is still is the largest source of oil and gas in the world, and this services that transport network, creates job directly, but now taking the skills that have been developed here and internationalizing them and globalizing them and creating income. Now, I'm going to turn to our next speaker, because Emirates, in some respects, has well understood what it's doing. But tell us a little bit about the Africa dimension. I mean, just a quick word on the number of people that are using Emirates and the growth you're seeing, what's coming next, a couple of sentences on that. But then let's just talk about the African dimension to what you're doing. Now, I was fascinated talking to you just now about the fact that a year ago you opened the direct flights from Dubai to Lusaka, which is very welcome for me because I don't have to go in directly. Tell us a little bit about, first of all, Emirates globally, where it is and where it's going, and then let's talk about the African dimension.
Yeah, Emirates, thank you very much. Emirates as such is one of the fastest growing airline in the world. For that, we need to thank you very much, the authority of Dubai, who has given us most probably the best infrastructure in the world. The vision of Dubai has been absolutely amazing in that sense, that the government of Dubai has always seen the aviation industry not as a cost but as a profit center. And today, airline and aviation industry in Dubai represent more than 120,000 jobs in Dubai, but represent as well 20% of the GDP of the city.
So give those numbers again, Jean-Luc. Employment?
Yeah, employment is 120,000 staff working for aviation industry in Dubai.
120,000 people in Dubai employed, single largest employer in the aviation sector.
Yeah. And
single largest employer in Dubai. 120,000, think of that. That's in the airline, it's in the airport and all the supported services.
And 20% of Dubai's GDP, with the objective of growing to 32% of Dubai's GDP by year 2020. It just gives you the image that the aviation industry in terms of Dubai has not been only something to carry people from one point to the other. It has been a major objective followed by the government in order to bring the tourism in the city. Personally, I joined Emirates 22 years ago.
Wait.
22 years ago.
You're almost at the beginning, my goodness.
Yeah, nearly. And at the time, we were not among the 100 airlines in the world. We are currently, if I'm right, number 2. And at that time in Dubai, you had only one hotel on the beach. You know, you had only one hotel on the beach in Dubai.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember that one, Jean-Luc.
And this is how, by growing the airline industry, we brought also the tourists there. And all together, we have been able to grow also the commerce, the trade, and obviously together, all the bodies in Dubai were working very much as Dubai Inc. I'm not wrong when saying that, Hamis, I think.
Dubai Inc., absolutely. So the airport last year, Dubai International Airport, the airport that most of us, most of you who had come from outside use or use it, do business, more than 50 million passengers passed through last year, and it's heading very rapidly to being the busiest international airport in the world. So we'll talk about the lessons that Aviation Dubai perhaps can share with the rest of the world, not just Africa. You could share them with the United Kingdom, actually. But let's talk about the Africa vision that Emirates have. You say, look, you're Emirates airline. You're there. You're mainly about bringing people from, I mean, the first direct flights was to Pakistan, wasn't it? No, it was the UK.
Yeah, Pakistan has been the first one.
The first was Pakistan. So that's what it was. And the airline was there to bring people, say, workers from subcontinent plus people who wanted to, Brits mainly, going back. So what on earth you expand your network into Africa? What's the vision that has inspired that?
The vision regarding Africa was, let's say, just an observation of the trade change in the economic world. If you go back 20 years ago, the worldwide economy, the economy of Africa was completely, I must say, 100% oriented north-south. And now if you look at the economy of Africa, it's very much east-west. Means that the biggest exchanges and the biggest growth of exchanges on Africa are coming or going to Asia. So the biggest exchanges in Africa are with Asia. As such, if you take a map, immediately you can see that at any point you fly from Africa. If you want to go to Asia, you have to fly above Dubai. So instead of flying above Dubai, why not stopping in Dubai and use our hub that connects you with all these destinations?
So where did it start in Africa? Where was the first? Where did the Emirates journey in Africa begin?
The company has been opened in 1985, and our first destination we opened in 1986. It was quite a logical destination. It has been Cairo. And,
so to the Arab world initially. But what about the sub-Saharan journey that you made?
After we started very steadily, I would not say quickly, because at present time we have 23 destinations across Africa. And among
23 destinations across Africa.
Yeah,
now.
and
that includes the whole of Africa. That includes the Arab countries as well.
And that means more than 350 flights a week.
How many?
Which is huge. More than 350 flights per week.
More than 350 flights from Dubai to African destinations each week.
And with rather big aircraft. We don't have any small aircraft. The smallest one is the 330, which is 230 or 40 seats.
Right.
So it means a huge capacity of plane. The company by itself, we employ more than 6,800 passengers, 6,800 people working for the company in all range of activity. We have pilots, we have engineers, we have people in commercial, and we grow this number on a regular basis.
Okay, so where are you going with your African adventure? Where will it stop? Is there any stopping going on?
We are developing a lot of traffic, so-called for us in our jargon, third and fourth freedom between UAE, Dubai and African destination. But obviously we fly a lot of passengers into China, which is actually the biggest investor in across Africa. So the traffic between Africa...
People come from China using Dubai and then going to Angola and elsewhere and Zambia. So what's coming next in your African... What's the next destination that's coming?
This one I cannot tell you.
There's a secret.
Obviously, because you know.
Are you saying at some point that more than 50 destinations,
more
than 50 African destinations, could be reached from Dubai directly? Do you think that could happen?
More than 50, I don't know, but
every single country in Africa would be reached. Is that possible?
No, altogether, not all destinations could sustain daily flights, and us, in order to develop strongly business, we need to have daily flights. Okay. So, with less than
you want daily flights, otherwise it doesn't really make much sense. You want daily flights.
Yeah.
So unless you can see enough traffic to support daily flights, there's not much point. But of course, it's very interesting, isn't it, that once you've got these direct flights, then all sorts of people start flying on the planes that you would never imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know that when the direct flight from New York to Dubai started, and that's some time ago, but when it started, I remember getting on the flights and looking around, and there were people on the plane. I just couldn't work out why they were on the plane. Because suddenly, this is just a completely new channel had been opened up, and the same with Latin America, exactly the same. People getting on the planes you could never actually forecast. But anyway, let's turn to the cargo. Well, that's mainly passenger. The cargo side is as important for Emirates. But let's talk to an aviation company that has focused on cargo side of the business and specializes in distributing through aviation cargo throughout Africa. So tell us, Sanjeev, about Astral Aviation, which you founded and you're now CEO.
Thank you very much. Astral Aviation is a very specialized cargo airline which flies on the intra-African network. We've actually been operational for the last 15 years, and we've also got a very strong client base which is in Dubai, and approximately 30% of our cargo which actually comes into Nairobi originates from Dubai. Dubai is a very important point for us, and we actually see Dubai as a market which is expanding. Purely because of the strategic location of Dubai and its close proximity to the African continent, which makes Dubai as a very important trading partner.
So the particular connection is the Nairobi-Dubai connection?
Yes.
And what's fueling that connection? What is the key that makes that inspired you to use Nairobi as to be a hub? And what's keeping the good flow of business between Nairobi and Dubai? What is driving that one?
I think there are a number of reasons, but I think the main reason is that Dubai is a consolidation hub for cargo originating from China and also from India because of the lack of direct connectivity from China and India into Africa. So what we've actually seen is a lot of cargo from China and India being consolidated in Dubai, and then it actually moves from Dubai into Africa.
And they using Nairobi as another hub?
I think if you look at the African continent, the continent is very large, and you cannot have a single hub for Africa. And we actually have a number of good hubs. You've got Nairobi, which serves East and Central Africa. You've got the hub of Johannesburg, which serves Southern Africa. And then you've also got the West African hub of Lagos and Accra, which actually serves the West African part. So where we are and where our footprint is on the East African side, but we also have expansion plans to also set up hubs in West Africa and Southern Africa so that we can actually have a better footprint in the continent.
Okay, and there's also goods going back and growing volume of business of cargo coming from Africa to Dubai. And
yes.
That's something you're doing as well. What are the main features of that trade? How is that changing?
What we are actually seeing is that the traditional patterns of exports, which used to be from Africa into Europe, is actually changing. We're actually seeing a lot of perishables from Africa, mainly cut flowers, fruits and vegetables, and fish, which is also flying from East Africa into the Middle East. And we're also seeing a lot of meat, which is also being transported by air. So one very good thing which is coming out of this whole thing is that the reliance on the traditional markets of Europe is actually shifting, and we're actually seeing new markets being formed, so that in the event that a region is actually not doing very well, like for example the European crisis 2 years ago, which had a devastating effect on the perishables market in East Africa, now we are actually seeing farmers and shippers looking for new markets, which is the Middle Eastern market, and actually shifting the focus from being dependent on the European market and now looking at new markets like the Middle East market, for example.
Very interesting. And this is all part of, it's an economic shift, but you have to have the infrastructure in place to take advantage of it, isn't it? People are moving to new markets, but if you don't have the infrastructure in place, the airport and everything goes with it, then you can't take advantage of it. So there's an interesting lesson. And finally, Hussein from Aramex, just a few words about Aramex, so people don't know the kind of services you provide and how Africa fits in to your story.
Yeah, let me give you a bit of a background for those who don't know Aramex, probably from outside the region. We're a global service provider, connecting markets, facilitating trade. Aramex is an alliance model. While we connect end-to-end. Parts of the network we control, parts we work with partners. Aramex is a light asset model, so I'm the opposite of what our fellow panelists do. I don't own a plane, I don't own a truck. I utilize the ports. So we manage capacity and we manage relationships with our clients, and both from suppliers and users. We're positioning Aramex as a leading service provider in growth markets, and these markets are obviously the Middle East, where we started, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, Central Asia. We're looking at definitely Russia and Brazil. When we talk about Africa, Edmund, we'd like to address Africa in regions. Africa is big. Africa is 52 countries, total population of 1.2. So the North has a different dynamics. If you go to Sub-Sahara, you tell them, I'm an African from the North. He'll tell you, you're from the North, you're an Arab. You're not an African. So Sub-Sahara has different dynamics, and there you've got East Africa, which is quite interesting. I'll tell you our story there. Quite interesting because of the regional integration. Anytime there is regional integration, we jump to the opportunity and move. East Africa with the East African community, with the agreement that was completed a couple of years back, there is a free flow of goods and people and capital between Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Burundi, and Rwanda, with two main ports, Mombasa and Dar es Salaam, and Kenyan Airways as a dominant airline in the region. So we stepped in, we did a couple of acquisitions, and we're expanding our footprint over there. A similar exercise was done with the SADC countries, having South Africa as a main hub for Southern Africa. So we did another acquisition in South Africa. And South Africa is the natural hub for the surrounding countries, for Namibia, Botswana, Zambia, and Mozambique. On the west is a bit more fragmented. So you see more alignment on the east and south. On the west, it's a bit more fragmented. We're in Ghana. We're entering Angola this year, same as Nigeria, and a couple of other African countries like Burkina Faso, Benin, Togo. Africa is changing. A young population, highly connected through the internet, highly connected through airlines. Emirates were the first probably investors in terms of reaching African destinations and offering space, both passengers and capacity. And this has opened Africa to the world. Governance in Africa is improving. Democracy is there. Elections are there. Africa is rich. Agriculture, as my friend Sanjeev was saying. Minerals, oil and gas. So definitely Africa is interesting for us. If you look at the trade patterns, South-South trade is happening. It's a reality. The BRIC trade within Africa is in the range of around $700 billion. China trades with Africa. That's a fantastic new trade lane. Is in the range of $200 billion. So we're capitalizing with that one as Aramex. We're rotating shipments into certain African hubs and then redistributing. The Indians were probably the most aggressive private investor that comes into Africa. I mean, the Chinese come with their state investment, the Indians come with their private money. India trades in the range of $50 billion. There's a historical ties between East Africa and India, and Durban, for example, in South Africa, and the Indians.
Historic ties between the region.
Yeah, exactly.
So what is
Turkey, just to interrupt you a bit, I want to complete the whole picture and then you
Sure,
can...
go ahead, Ash.
Turkey is, you see Turkish Airlines following the footprint of Emirates Airlines. Turkey invests, trades around $17 to $20 billion with Africa. So we saw the opportunity of expansion into Sub-Saharan Africa. We've been in the north, historically. And we're facilitating trades, connecting markets on a regional level, connecting these markets to other BRICS countries and to other hubs.
And you see that Dubai is the natural hub for service in this network. You think Dubai will continue to hold its position, or is there a possibility that it could lose out to other hubs developing in Africa or elsewhere in the region?
You know, in life, there is always a possibility of losing your leadership if you don't continue to invest. Dubai is a natural hub for East Africa. Let's be clear. But it's not the natural hub for North Africa. North Africa trades a lot with Europe. So you can see Marsilia as a hub there. So yes, Dubai is a natural hub for East Africa and will continue to be a natural hub for East Africa because 7-8 days direct sailing, you're there in Mombasa. 5 hours flying, you're there, you touch a major airport in Africa, and then you go. Southern Africa, South Africa is a bit advanced in logistics. So you see Durban has always been a hub to...
the South African hubs are pretty effective.
I mean, and then you... But yes, I mean, I think Dubai, the model of Dubai is fantastic. You've got DP World, you've got Emirates, you've got customs, you've got the free zones. So all in all, this gives a fantastic place for companies like ICE to position and trade into Africa.
So what do you think? I mean, we'll talk about what lessons perhaps could be learned from Dubai and the UAE in Africa, and what needs to develop in this relationship to make the transport. What is the number one issue? You're dealing with customers and they come to you and they say, I want you to help me deliver a cargo from Indonesia and I want to send it to Kenya, Hashem. And it's the sort of thing they would say. And then you sit down, you're pretty confident about getting it into Dubai, I think, one way or the other, by boat or air or whatever. But then you look about taking it into Africa. What are the, I mean, I'm not trying to be critical, but what are the principal problems that your customers face when they're trying to deliver goods into African markets, and the ones that you think could be most easily addressed? Is there a simple answer to that, Hashem?
Yeah. I mean, look, when you look at logistics, you look at end-to-end. And the first end, the start might be in Dubai, but the end probably might be in a landlocked country in Africa. You've got 16 countries landlocked. So reaching a major port is not rocket science. You could, and then the infrastructure in Dubai, you could load a container, you could load a flight, and then you can, a couple of hours, you do an online transaction and you go. So flying by sea or by air is no-brainer, and everybody can do it. The challenge starts when you hit the port and when you hit the airport, in the documentation, in the compliance, how many documents you need to clear, in customs clearance, in the relationship that you're able to establish with the customs authorities, with the having, in a good sunny day, it takes you 7-8 days to clear a container in Mombasa. Why? Here, I clear a container in 8 hours. So what I would like to see is a transfer of knowledge and cooperation between Dubai, because Dubai has already proved itself as one of the most successful hubs. So Dubai is the hub. However, the sustainability of Dubai as a hub depends on what happens on the other end. The question is, what are we doing in Dubai to ensure that while I load the container here, when it reaches there, me and my customer, we want fast clearance. So I'm calling upon the bilateral relationships to be established between Dubai, because it's a starting point, and the major ports and airports in Africa.
Right, so you want the bilateral with the main ports, like Mombasa, so that the connection is directly. We heard today Mr. Ngwenya, who's the Secretary General of COMESA, 19 countries. He was talking about a couple of things. One is to have a free trade area involving the East African community and the SADCC. That's one. Secondly, about creating a virtual trading system. Did you hear how he was talking about that? Because he pointed out that 60% of the cost of moving cargo within Africa is due to regulations and red tape.
I think what I would like to see is pre-clearance. Pre-clearance. You pre-clear human beings when you fly from Shannon in Ireland to the US, right? When you send a container now to the US, you fill up your online manifest and then it goes. Why don't we look at a pre-clearance relationship between, example, Dubai and Kenya? I mean, the problem of Africa, one of them is collection of customs duties and documentation. What if we establish, just think, dream a bit, a Kenyan customs integrated facility here? I can put in forward in my documentation here, get clearance, move, and as soon as it hits the Kenyan port, you know, it goes out directly, because when you're stuck, you're into detention, you're into congestion, and a lot of losses. You know, and we're demanding change. We're looking at public-private partnerships in Africa and a lot of things to happen, but things are slow. Let's admit it here. And the growth of Africa is moving ahead of us. So let's go a shortcut parallel. While transferring knowledge, let's look at pre-clearance relationship between Dubai and certain ports and airports, and then, you know, trade will be facilitated.
There you go. So this is a very specific suggestion. Obviously, the UAE as a federal government has to be engaged in this, but you have the Minister of Economy here. All we need is the Minister of Foreign Trade as well.
I want the public to push for this.
So that's a policy question, but to try and facilitate already a pretty healthy connection. And as we have learnt, the more activity there is in a port, the more activity there is in an airport, the more knock-on benefits there are in terms of job creation and everything else. And that will be benefiting, if we're talking about Kenya, benefiting Kenya. Now, just Sanjeev, from your perspective, same question. I mean, you're dealing every day with everyday challenges. It's not a question of philosophy, this isn't. It's, what is the single thing that you would say that perhaps could change in the UAE to make it easier, or in Africa, or both places, just to make the whole experience of getting cargo in and out of Africa through Dubai or the Middle East, to make that more efficient? What would you like to see change?
Definitely, if I had a wish list, it would be a number of wishes. But I think Hussein has made some very valid points. And I think if you look at the continent of Africa, we don't have any roads from North to South Africa or from East to West Africa.
So the transport infrastructure question is fundamental. I mean, I do agree with you, but that can't be done by the private sector.
Yes.
That really can't. That's going to be massive public programs, in my view. I don't think the
That's
public's
right.
private sector.
So I think it's a combination of factors which have to be done over a period of time, starting with the basics, which is the rail infrastructure. You know, Africa is a very big continent. We have landlocked destinations, and we also have a lot of rail opportunities. And a very good example is an Egyptian conglomerate, Citadel, which is also invested in the East African railways. So I think rail has to be looked into. One has to look into the roads. One has to look at upgrading the airports and the ports. Right. And I think the thing which is very important over here is for Africa to learn from the experience of Dubai, and to actually try and look at the Dubai model and try and actually learn something from it, and try and replicate at least 20 or 30% of it, because a lot of it will actually bring about a lot of efficiency. And I think the other area that we are actually seeing a lot of challenges is the customs. In a country like Kenya, which is a major transshipment point, I think one of the biggest problems that the government is worried about is the diversion of cargo meant for the neighboring countries into Kenya. So they've actually made the market very protected. And instead of looking at how they can actually make the whole system very efficient, their focus is on to make sure that nothing for Uganda or Tanzania is actually sold in the Kenyan market. Yeah. And that actually affects the way they think, and that affects the way they do their regulations. But on a positive note, we're actually seeing a lot of changes in the customs. We're actually seeing the establishment of the East African Customs Union, where you've actually got the 3 major East African partners who are actually unifying their customs procedures. And I think it's just a matter of time that you can actually be able to pre-clear some of your cargo. Definitely not something that's going to happen today or tomorrow, but one of the things that we will actually be able to do as a private sector is to actually talk to the regulators and actually explain to them that if they don't change the way they do their things, then we're actually going to go backwards. And at this point in time, we cannot look back, we just have to look forward. And I think we have to look at Dubai as the Dubai model as being one which we can learn from, and one which we can actually develop and actually make the whole system work much more better.
Okay, well, there's a general lesson from Dubai. The infrastructure question is a big one. And the Dubai model is, for those of you who don't know, in Dubai has taken a particular approach, which is actually for the government to pay for the infrastructure and build it. And get the infrastructure in place, get the airport built, get the roads built, get it built, and then the private sector pays for it afterwards through, you know, the fees and everything else. It's PPP. It is PPP, but you're not trying to put the financing and the legalities and the governance all together with the construction. And we've had a number of examples. There are very few examples in the world of very successful transport infrastructure PPP. Very few examples. And yet this is absolutely vital for the economic development of Africa. And it's heartbreaking to see that it's not in place. And the great thing, I'm sorry I'm ranting, the great thing about roads, it makes it very easy, it just makes it easier for people to get to know each other. If you've got a decent road, then it's a lot easier to drive up and meet people, and when you meet them, you get on with them. What do? You trade. You trade. It's completely normal. But the friendship comes first, and the friendship's only possible if the travel is easy. If you can easily go to the place without it killing you, then it's easy to build relationships and economics will flow. So that is the right way around, and you can, and it's true, you can go anywhere in sub-Saharan Africa, and you see that incredible number of people walking. And that's part because the cars can't afford, but there's no point having a car because the roads are so poor. And so the basic promotion for trade is the transport infrastructure, get the roads in place. A town that's 20 miles from another town, the chances of people trading with each other is zero if they can't actually meet. So anyway, that's the infrastructure. So, Jean-Luc, I mean, there are so many. I mean, we're not going to try and elevate Dubai too far into the universe and saying this is the most extraordinarily successful all round in every aspect, but the successes are there. So, what do you think that from your point of view, as someone who is responsible for promoting Emirates' network in Africa and using Africa as a way of servicing a global network, what would you like to say would be maybe your top 3 things that you would like to see happen in the Africa-Dubai aviation relationship, whether it's infrastructure or services or whatever, that you think would be mutually beneficial both to Dubai and the Middle East and to Africa?
I'm sorry, I will go back a little bit to what you said before. The biggest success of Dubai has been to understand that this infrastructure are not to just to please ourselves by building huge infrastructure, but these infrastructure are bringing trade, tourism, wealth, money, and as I said, the airline industry here is 20% of the GDP. The problem of Africa is very often that the government thinks that the airline industry and the airport are the milk cow of the government. That means that they kill their airport and the airline industry by means of taxes.
Right.
And I think the big success of Dubai is this model which is free of tax. The second point, which kills as well very much the airline industry, I will tell you a quite funny example. You know, so some countries are willing to build a hub in Africa, but at the same time they request all passengers transiting through the airport to have a transit visa. You know, you cannot work like this. You know, the big strength of Dubai, why people are choosing Dubai as a transit hub, is because you don't have any transit visa. And why we carry more than 50 million passengers in this hub, and at the end of 2013, why we will go beyond the 60 million passengers through Dubai hub, is because you don't need any transit visa. And the fact that you don't need any transit visa, it facilitates the transit and obviously a seamless transit in the city. And also, the government of Dubai have put in place infrastructure that allow people to issue visa online to bring also the passenger into the city. Okay? So you can have exactly the same thing in many countries. It's very easy to place, you know. It's just to forget that before to try to make money from your airport, try to make your airport right and bring the economy in your country, bring the trade in your country, bring the tourists, and these ones, they will bring the wealth of your country. But use this infrastructure to bring the wealth and not to bring taxes. And as soon as you will have done that, you will be very successful. And this is the kind of things that could be very much copied from the Dubai experience.
Yep, excellent point. It does make me wonder what the World Bank has been doing all these years. I mean, where did the money go? All right, just fun. Your Excellency, again, some lessons that, you know, things that you would like to see alter that could help both the Middle East and Dubai and Africa, mutual beneficially, that would support, and it's relevant to your sector.
The reality of the matter is, back to basics. Really, 90% of the world trade is through sea.
Right.
And transportation becomes the critical part. It's not only internal infrastructure such as road or transport sector, but the real sea transport is the critical part. There
Right.
is two elements in it. Sea transport doesn't work by building a port without a service rendered, such as ship repair and storage and facilities for these goods to be, whether be it in bulk or in simple warehousing systems. So therefore, I think Africa has a huge potential. The question is, how does this potential can get together? Dubai has good examples, and no doubt it can transfer this, or it can elevate this to Africa. But it has to have the fundamentals of it is the legal process of how this can be integrated. To grow these kind of opportunities, Africa has all the resources that we know of. However, one resource that Africa has also, which is recently has been pushing harder on, is the oil and gas sector, where it is critical for its energy development and hard currency coming in due to the sale of that. Now, we must think ahead of what needs to happen. You know, Africa has a future in its own desire, its own destiny. It doesn't matter if China today is there or the Western powers is there. Africa really has a different destiny. And we know it, and we can see it. If you look at up to 2030 and beyond, you can see what will happen in Africa. It's going to grow, mammothly grow in every possible aspect. The question is, which infrastructure it needs today? It's the sea transport structure. That's the most critical one, because transporting these things is important.
Sea transport infrastructure, can you be more specific?
Ports.
Ports, you're talking about large-scale ports,
no,
medium-sized ports?
There are medium-sized ports which is needed in certain areas, and large ports in certain areas, because you need to ensure this infrastructure doesn't also become mammoth where you don't have enough volume of transport.
Okay.
So therefore, these are all easily calculated, easily managed.
Yes.
We know the sector where it's growing.
Yes.
We know the growth of potential of transport. Now the sea, of course, for the oil and gas, it's a different sector. Yeah. You will not need a port. You need an offshore terminals to transport. But for interrelation transport, the best way for Africa is actually, especially taking the way it is structured and its coastline, is actually by sea transport and inner city or inner land transport. And I think that's important. And Dubai can, without a doubt, support that. Dubai, without a doubt, can take its infrastructure building, because we are ahead of our time in certain infrastructure we have in Dubai. But I'll give you a good example. Port Rashid is built and Dry Dock is built. Same time, principally in the same principles. Why? International trade doesn't come to you if it doesn't have a service. And the service is not supply you with goods, but make sure that ship can't go back again. If anything happened to that ship, there is the service rendered of repairing or maintenance.
Right.
That was the critical factor.
Right.
That's how it became centralized in that. The same thing in the airport. It's not the airline only which comes, it's the infrastructure which you're building for the airport. And then the growth that took place. The ease of visas, be it, or the regulation is critical too. But I think we can learn from that. It's very simple. You can actually do it. Today, I heard that there will be an undertaking from the group of these countries for any investment to come, it is guaranteed.
Right.
So there is some sort of protection coming in of how this investment can be done. Now, if you ask yourself, can the private sector do all of this? No. It's government money first, and then the private sector will pay for it, because it will pay in fees, it will pay in renders, it will pay in utilities. And therefore, that is the most important concept. It's used all over the world.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
I think important.
Excellent. Well, it's a very rich and abundant area of opportunity. Yeah. I believe that in Africa, vast, enormous area, that transport logistics in 25 years' time will be employing 30% of the population, as it is in already. Aviation is already doing in Dubai. Mm-hmm. The transport sector in an area of such vast scale, in which enormous population scattered over a big area, it means that transport services of every kind are probably going to be the biggest employer in the majority of African countries in 30 years' time. And I can see everybody here contributing to that change. And it won't be just in Africa, it's going to be in the Middle East as well. It's going to be in Arabia as well. Mm-hmm. Arabia, which we are in, is a massive continent, effectively, even though it's a peninsula. Right, any questions or comments? Throw your hands up. Everybody inspired. Someone at the front here. Microphone, please. Microphone. Fast, run.
He's running.
Sprint. There you go. Can you say who you are, please?
My name is Abdulaziz Nasser. I'm the marketing manager of Hong Kong Trade Development Council.
From the Hong Kong
Trade Development Council.
And where are you based?
We are based, our regional office is based in Dubai.
You were here, right.
And our Dubai office covers Middle East and Africa, not
Okay.
only North Africa. When I joined the council in the past 7 or 8 years, whenever I mention a country in Africa other than North Africa, the council in Hong Kong used to say that it's not safe, why you are thinking to that part of the world. But suddenly, in the past 2 years, we deeply moved our promotion to Africa. I've been in Africa in the past 2 years for more than 5 to 10 times. Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, I'm going to Uganda, and when I started thinking, when I wanted to go there, I was thinking of, I was afraid. People start saying it's not safe, and all these stories that you could hear. But when I went there, my first time, I was really shocked, surprised. I was even, couldn't understand why, it's another Africa that we talk about. It's something different. Maybe what we hear is totally different. But I could share all the problems, and I could see all the problems that our delegates here were talking about in my eyes. I was last week in Mombasa, and I met the director, the CEO of the Mombasa airport. And in fact, I can realize that the officials are aware about the problems. And they are trying to solve these problems. But the thing is, we suddenly saw Africa. We suddenly realized that there are some economical problems that we are facing when we are dealing now with Europe and US, and we need to find another economies, and we started looking and realizing the opportunity. Are we late or not? That's another issue. But what I can advise is the following. in the past 2 years, I've been traveling to Africa. I realized that most of the flights and almost 95% of my flights are through Emirates Airlines, which proves that the airline is very good and giving us very good service. But I realized, and please take this into consideration, most of our flights, when we are coming back from Africa, we are arriving evening, mainly from Kenya or Nigeria. If you look, most of them, when we arrive in evening. And most of the time, the flights are late in Dubai. And most of the times, we are facing that it's taking us a lot of time when we arrive to go out the airport. And that's why I believe the importance of Emirates Airlines to reach to Africa, because it is easy, direct flight, to arrive there. The timings are very good, but when you are coming back, the flights are really giving us some hectic problems.
Thank you very much from our frequent flyer.
Last point.
I'm sure there's other people.
I didn't pay, huh?
But okay, well, the flight's arriving late. I mean, if we're going to start that process, anything to say on that, Jean-Luc?
No, just I think across Africa, one point I agree with you. The image which is delivered outside Africa is very often negative. And you have a lot of countries in Europe to be on the safe side. They always recommend to their nationals not to travel across Africa. I just don't want to tell you my entire story. I started in Africa, my first job in '73. It has been in South Africa, then in Zaire, and then in Nigeria and in Chad.
Okay.
And now I'm traveling in the past 6 months across 25 countries in Africa. I've never been felt myself in danger.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you have to take some precautions, but everywhere else in the world you have the same.
Take up the specific complaints.
No, it's not to complain, but it is to make trade better. For example, I was planning to organize an exhibition, for example, in Lagos or in Kenya. And my problem is how to plan so that I can know that the products arrive before I myself arrive.
Oh.
Like, if my exhibitor is moving all the way from Hong Kong to Lagos or to Kenya, how can I plan for him? Because many times I send products through Aramex and they arrive, no, because we are
the customer of everybody.
Aramex. So the products arrive normally lately after my event.
You have to delay your flight.
And I know that
the problem is you, man.
And the problem is not because of Aramex. I realize this.
And
the problem is customs.
I don't think
So how can we help each other?
Yes, thanks
so
very
that
much.
We can do that.
This is
Thank you.
a great opportunity to raise it. Can you pick them up afterwards?
I think he should send a complaint to Aramex and Emirates.
Well, he's here. He is. He's here. He's complaining. Yes, please. Microphone at the back there. Anybody else got a question? We've only got... I can take a couple more questions. One there and one there. I'm sorry about this. The lady first. The gentleman then. Stand up so you can be seen. Lady, can you say who you are?
My name is Kirsten Stab. I represent the city of Hamburg here in Dubai. We heard a lot here in this panel and in the plenary session about the investments in infrastructure, logistics, which are necessary. It was very rarely mentioned that to operate ports, logistics in general, you need people trained to do that. Is that something that your companies are also looking into, to also transfer knowledge, as you mentioned, and to train, to share, to train, to offer training programs in Africa?
Anything to say on that?
Yeah, we just recently developed a portfolio on DDW. It's called DDW Global Offshore Services. And that's our objective for that mainly is that they will travel wherever the problem is, repair be it or maintenance or service, and accordingly do the necessary there. But transferring management knowledge is absolutely important. And I think Dubai DP World did a very good job in actually managing certain ports around the globe and at the same time employing nationals of that countries and developing the systems. And you could see that happening all around the globe now, whereby management actually imported in, they transfer knowledge, they train, develop the national of that country, and then that country can easily develop itself within. And I think that's important. You cannot do it without certain knowledge base which should be transferred.
Well, we heard today, and Gerald Lawless said 1,000 of the employees of Jumeirah are from Africa.
Yes.
1,000, he said?
Yeah.
And that is training, because they'll be trained here, and then they can work in Jumeirah premises when they are established. And you can multiply that with all the companies here. They have an incentive, actually, naturally, to train people either here or there.
And we have a lot of African who works actually in DDW, in Dubai.
It's already happening. The transfer of skill is already automatically happening. Last question at the back, please.
Duncan Alexander from the Travel Marketing Store. It's really just building on the first gentleman's point and an observation about other parts of the world and why Dubai has been so successful. Governments need to work with private technology providers to bring in e-freight, e-borders and e-visas. If you do not start to do this within the African continent, Asia is going to beat you to it. They are now creating in Asia blocks of countries similar to the Schengen arrangements up in Europe, where people can easily transfer themselves from one country to the other once they've entered that economic bloc. And this is the way forward. If you cannot easily trade and transmit people and goods across the borders using electronic pre-clearance, which the gentleman on the panel mentioned, you will be at a disadvantage versus other countries. Emirates exported its technology with regard to cargo to 28 other airlines around the world, a leading airline solution. It did that to enable e-freight with its trading partners, so that trade can move from somewhere like Sri Lanka through Dubai and onto North America pre-cleared. It takes a person 45 minutes to an hour and a half to transit through an airport. It can take freight 6 to 16 hours because of 28 pieces of paper. But Dubai's enabled itself to eliminate that, and with reciprocal agreements between two countries, bring freight transits down to 4 hours. Where will you ship your freight through? So really it's about people in this room galvanizing their own governments to open up the borders with these three areas.
Excellent. Anything that facilitates trade is good. Anything that facilitates trade is good. So I think we've all agreed on that, and this is the most important part of the Africa-Middle East story, and it's critical to the development of Africa in the future, and the way that the Middle East in many ways can make the biggest contribution because of the particular connections in this sector. I want to thank our panelists for being here. Each one of them have made a very particular contribution to the challenge of being addressed by this conference. It's just the beginning. Please take advantage of their presence. Introduce yourself. Let's see if we can take the lessons and apply them both here and elsewhere. So, but before you go, can you show your appreciation, please?